Rain has stopped today. I've been fighting weather. I've been held up a lot on making videos. We're gonna have to deal with some wind, it looks like. Hopefully that won't be too bad. Might have to do some editing. We're up on the Blue Ridge Parkway at White's Gap Overlook. Looking back over the Shenandoah Valley, we're looking west. But what I wanted to talk about today is there seems to be a little bit of a dust-up going on in the motorcycling community over armor, wearing protective armor while you're riding a motorcycle. Ryan at Fort9 did a video saying that it's not really necessary. Other people have replied to his video with their own video, but I'm not going to do that, because when it comes to armor, I can take it or leave it. That's just the way I look at it. If I buy a jacket that's got armor in it, fine. If I buy a jacket and I like that jacket, it don't have armor in it, fine. I don't care. I don't have a preference one way or the other. I don't advocate for it or advocate against it. A lot of people give me crap for wearing an open face helmet. I'm going to buy a new full face at some point, but I enjoy my open face helmet. And I don't really harp on armor or dwell on it too much, because I think about things in a little bit of a different manner. I'm more interested in avoiding the accident as opposed to surviving one. Because in my opinion, armor is not going to help you survive an accident. It's going to reduce sliding injuries and things like that. It's not going to help you at all if you slam into a tree or something at 30 miles an hour or better. You know, that's not what the armor is there to do. The armor is basically there to protect you from falling from here to there. And that's it. That's what the armor is for. The abrasion resistance is actually more important in my opinion, because that lets you know how far down the road you can slide. But when it comes to avoiding the accidents, like how I kind of think about it, that's not as important as you would think either, because the slide really isn't that far statistically. So let's get into it. Well, first thing, let's get some of this stuff out of the way, because I know some people are going to want to see the bike uncluttered. But you get to see me standing next to it. Like I said, when it comes to motorcycle safety gear and stuff, you always hear things like dress for the slide, not the ride, things like that. And I don't think of it that way. I want to avoid the slide. Why am I sliding down the road? What caused that? And that's, I go to the root issue and try to avoid things that way. And if you look into motorcycle accident statistics and things, you'll find that, trying to figure out the best way to word this, over 90% of all motorcycle accidents are the rider's fault. Man, tough love, folks. We're crap as motorcyclists as a group. Like I said, over 90% of all motorcycle fatalities are due to the rider on the motorcycle. Because 70%, over 70, I don't know the exact number because I haven't looked in a long time, but over 70% of all motorcycle accidents involve a single motorcycle in a curve where the motorcyclist is at fault. Which means the motorcycle left his lane and went off the road, something like that, or there was some gravel in the turn, things like that, caused him to go down. That's 70% of all motorcycle accidents. The next 20%, the number two reason why motorcyclists get killed and get in wrecks, is because they're in a curve, single motorcycle hits another vehicle, and it's the motorcyclist's fault. So in over 90% of all motorcycle accidents, the rider is at fault. And so we need to look at what is causing these faults and avoid that. If we can avoid that, we can avoid 90% of all accidents, and we can actually ride much safer. So things like, we always want to talk about cagers and cars pulling out in front of us and things like that. And I just had a close call with a car just last year. But that's in that, less than 10% of all motorcycle accidents are in that little area. And so that involves things like mechanical problems, cars pulling out in front of you, a deer runs out in the road, you know, just anything else is in that small, tiny percentage. And so when I look at, you know, things like safety and how I'm going to carry myself or prepare myself for things, I don't look at possibilities. Sure, all kinds of things are possible. I could walk out of my house and a meteor might fall and hit me on the head. It's possible. But is it probable? So I tend to lean towards the probabilities, which is why I kind of focus on what's the big issues with motorcyclists, and then everything else kind of falls into place if you take care of those two big issues. And so it basically comes down to me having two rules. Got the Blue Ridge Parkway behind me, but I don't have much of a curve set up where I can set the camera up and demonstrate some things. Got a car going by here for a second. Okay, car's gone. My two biggest rules that I ride by is this. Number one, stay in your lane. Do not leave your lane unless it's absolutely necessary. If it's absolutely necessary for you to do an overtake, do your overtake. But do it quickly, do it safely, get back in your lane. That's your safe spot, is in your lane. So ride in a manner where you're not going into a corner overcooking it. You know, this isn't a racetrack. Just slow down. I mean, it's that simple. So if you stay in your lane and ride responsibly at a reasonable pace, you can avoid 70% of motorcycle accidents right there. You can take 70% of them off the board. I mean, it's a no-brainer. And now to deal with the next 20%. So now that we're going to ride responsibly and not be trying to concentrate on crimping apexes and doing crazy things, we get to spend, you know, a little bit of brain power observing everything around us, because you need to make sure nothing enters your operating space. If it does, you need to be able to maneuver around it. My close call I had last year, I was operating at a speed where somebody came around a blind turn fully in my lane. Had I been in my car, there would have been nowhere for me to go, and it would have been a head-on collision. I was on a motorcycle, so I was able to squeak by him, and it was tight. If I would have been on the Himalayan, I probably would have gotten hit because of the metal panniers that stick out a little bit. It was that close. I mean, I was worried about whether I was going to lose my left leg. It was really close. So keep your head on a swivel, watch your mirrors. You know, if somebody's coming up behind you and pushing you a little bit, pull over, get out of his way. You know, who cares? Let him go. If he's in front of you, he's no longer a danger, because you can keep an eye on him out there. If he's behind you and tailgating you, and for a long ways, you're constantly looking at your mirrors, you're worried, you're nervous, things like that, get rid of that. Pull over, let him go. So we're constantly looking for things that are entering our lane, like deer, things like that. So if we can take care of those two things, that's 90% of all motorcycle accidents we can avoid. And at that point, the question of armor, you know, kind of becomes moot. You're fine. Now that last 10% or so, that can be a little bit of a different ballgame. And there's so many things that can go wrong in that last 10%. I couldn't list them all. The list would be miles long, and there'd be things that that I never even thought to list that happen. I mean, shit happens out here. Of the motorcycle accidents I am aware of, including the ones I've had two myself. Virtually all of them have broken those two rules that I mentioned. Stay in your lane, make sure nothing enters your space. There are a couple that stand out that are in that little 10%. There's 3 of them that I'm aware of. And 2 of them, well, let's just talk about the 3. One of them, a friend of mine, had taken his motorcycle to a shop and got some work done on it. And as he was on his way home from the shop, his chain broke for some reason. I don't know what they did to his bike. I don't know if they did something to the chain. I don't have all the details. But anyway, his chain broke and wrapped around his rear wheel and locked up his rear wheel, and he skidded, at speed and went down. Then another one of my friends rode a ZX7, and he had it for a while, had several thousand miles on the bike. It was his first bike, but he'd owned it long enough to put several thousand miles on it, and he took it to the dealership to get new tires put on. It was the first time he had ever had new tires installed on any motorcycle. This was his first bike. So he left the parking lot thinking he could just lean it over and gun it and take off down the road on brand new tires. You can't do that. You got to scuff tires up a little bit. And he learned the hard way and went down. The third one has actually involved me. I didn't crash, but I really can't believe, I don't know how I didn't crash. I owned a Buell at the time, and I had to take it in for a swing arm recall. They were going to replace the swing arm. And when I picked the bike up, they had replaced it and everything, good to go. I got my bike, and I needed to make a fuel stop before I got home. I was on the interstate, and there's a really nice off-ramp in this area, and you could hit it and just really lean over and just go right on around this thing. And that was my plan. I was going to do that. So I got there and did it, leaned over, did my thing, got through the corner, pulled into the gas station, hopped off my bike and looked, and the entire back end of my bike, including my tire, was covered in motor oil. I was like, where in the world did that come from? So I ended up pulling off the seat, because the oil tank is under the seat on that bike, and the oil cap had come out and oil was puking out of the oil tank. What happened was, when the dealer put this new swing arm on, they pinched the breather hose and caused pressure in there, and that caused oil to puke out all over my bike. And I have no idea how I made it around that off-ramp without crashing. So there are things that happen that don't involve those two principles that I said. But if you start analyzing, crashes you're aware of or things like that, look for those two items. Did the motorcycle leave its lane, or did something else enter the motorcycle's operating space? Did it get rear-ended? Did somebody pull out in front of him? You got to be watching for that kind of stuff. Even though that final 10% is kind of a wild card, so we got to watch out for that. So that's just my take on it. Like I said, I don't necessarily preach armor. I do believe that the padding is more of an assist in the slide than it is the impact, if that makes any sense. I don't trust it as far as impact goes, because if you're going to impact the ground, that's one thing. But you're sliding down the road at 30, 40, 50, 60 miles an hour, you're not going to slide too far because the road isn't always straight. And if 90% of the crashes involve a corner, that means you're sliding off of the road somewhere. And you're going to hit a tree, a sign, a fence, something. You're going to come in contact with something most likely. And that armor is not going to protect you in that situation. It'll help you out in the slide. It will assist with the abrasion resistance, because there is physically something thicker there that's going to help you. But it's not going to stop an impact with a car, telephone pole, anything like that. So, and we have a tendency to kind of fool ourselves into a false sense of security when it comes to armor. And I've done this myself. When I got out of the Army, I sold my motorcycle that I had where I was stationed at, because I couldn't travel with it. I couldn't make the move with the bike. It was going to be easier to sell it and then buy a new one when I got where I was going. So I sold the bike, sold my helmet, sold my gear, got to where I was going, bought my new bike, and the dealer didn't have a helmet that I liked, because we all know it's more important to look good than to be safe. So I had to order one, and this is before the days of the internet, so it was mail order, so it was going to take a while for this helmet to arrive. So I figured, and the place I moved to didn't have a helmet law, so I could ride the bike without a helmet. I figured, well, okay, what I'll do is I'll just ride safe, and then once my helmet gets here, then I can go crazy and do all this stuff. And some guys wanted me to join their little motorcycle club. They had a sport bike club, and the bike I bought was a GSXR 1000. And there was some, I don't want to say criteria, but there was kind of a test you had to do to see if you were worthy of being in this club. So you had kind of this initiation process. Two things you had to do. One was you had to run through this twisty section, miles long twisty section, and you had to do it in a certain time. Now, to do that time, you actually had to break the speed limit to do it. It wasn't impossible, but you were going faster than you were supposed to if you were going to make the time to be in this club. And the other one was you had to verifiably go over 150 miles an hour on your bike. And so members of the club had to go with you, and you had to do 150 miles an hour somewhere. And then you had to run this section in a certain time. So I was riding with them, and we were all heading to a dealer. And on the way there was kind of an abandoned stretch of highway. It wasn't actually abandoned, but it was basically abandoned. And you had about 5 miles of just clear 4-lane highway. Hardly any traffic on it, anything like that. So I did my 150 mile an hour run there, and I did it without a helmet. And I was like, okay, I didn't crash or anything, but I'll wait till I get my helmet before I do the twisty section, because then I can just go crazy. But then I started thinking about it, and it was like, well, wait a minute. Why don't I just ride safely all the time with or without a helmet, and then I don't have to worry about crashing? You know, so I had kind of talked myself into saying, all right, I can do this more dangerous stuff once I get my helmet. Then it was cool for me to do that, as opposed to me just simply not doing it and being safe about it. So yeah, I've grown up a lot since then, and you know, I think about things a little bit differently now. So hopefully this wind isn't killing the microphone, and I'm going to cut this off and get out of here and enjoy what's left of a halfway decent day before it starts raining again. So take care, and I'll catch you guys later. Well, if you made it this far in the video, I'll give you a little bit of a follow-up on that 150 mile an hour helmetless run I did. I had to wear eye protection. That was the only law. I could wear like a Speedo, flip-flops. As long as I had eye protection on, I was good on a motorcycle. You just wear what the laws were like at this place. So I was wearing a pair of Oakley M frames, and when I looked down to see my speedometer had passed the 150 mile an hour mark, glasses went flying off my face. So the wind speed at 150 miles an hour on naked eyes, you know, messes you up pretty bad. And so I like rode the bike up as fast as I could and got off on the shoulder. And like I said, it was an abandoned stretch of highway. We were sitting mostly abandoned. And I pulled over, and everybody pulled in behind me. I told them, hey, I lost my glasses. I got to run back and get them. They're like, all right, we'll wait here. So I started jogging down the road. You'd be amazed at how far back those glasses were. The stopping distance from 150 miles an hour was a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. I was wore the hell out. Take care, everybody.